Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's now 10 a.m., so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the public workshop for retailers and distributors, your duty to comply with safer consumer product regulations. My name is Danielle Gilstrap, and I'm a public participation specialist with the Department of Toxic Substances Control, which we're going to refer to as DTSC throughout the workshop today. This workshop is being recorded, and by joining, you agree to be recorded. The meeting is scheduled from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. However, if we are able to answer all of the questions before 12:30, we may end early. If we reach the end of the workshop and we're not able to answer all of the questions, please email your questions to saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. That's saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. We've also dropped that email address into the chat box. The purpose of today's workshop is to provide information on retailers' duty to comply with safer consumer product regulations. Following the presentation, we will take questions and feedback from the audience. Please note the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of this workshop will be available for review at DTSC's Safer Consumer Products webpage at https://dtsc.ca.gov/SCP/SAFER-CONSUMERS-events/. We shared this link earlier in the chat. Slide 2, please. I will now go over the logistics for the workshop. You are in a listen and participation role. Automatic closed captions have been turned on. If you would like to follow along with closed captions, please click on the CC button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please note we will not be taking questions through the chat feature today. This feature is reserved for providing hyperlinks and information to attendees. Today we will be taking questions through the Q&A feature and raised hands. Please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. You may submit your questions throughout the workshop, and we will respond to them during the Q&A session after the presentation. You may send us as many questions as you want. However, we do ask that you send one question at a time so that we're able to respond to each question adequately. Additionally, we will be taking questions via raised hands. Please wait until the end of the presentation to raise your hand. We will do our best to respond to the questions in the order they are received. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. You will be called on and prompted to unmute yourself by pressing *6. Lastly, please note that our presenters are hosting this workshop from different locations. Please bear with us if there are any time lags, longer pauses, or technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience and understanding and cooperation in making this workshop a success today. Slide 3, please. This is our agenda for today's workshop. First, Robin Christensen, Deputy Director of Safer Consumer Products, will provide a welcome and opening remarks. Then Anna Bellini, Senior Environmental Scientist, will present on the Safer Consumer Products Program and retailers' duty to comply. Following the presentation, we will have a Q&A session to respond to your questions. This is your opportunity to ask questions for the panel to address today. Finally, Rob Brashia, Senior Environmental Scientist, will conclude with closing remarks. Thank you to all the panelists for your time and dedication in being here today. Without further ado, please welcome Deputy Director Robin Christensen. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and many thanks to everyone that's here today. And I realize you've taken time out of your busy schedules to learn more about our program. So I'd like to start by orienting you first to the Department of Toxic Substances Control, or DTSC, and our program. The DTSC mission is to protect California's people, communities, and the environment from toxic substances, to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated land, and to compel manufacturers to make safer consumer products. DTSC is a large department, and there are numerous programs that are working in different ways to accomplish this mission. Next slide, please. DTSC carries out numerous laws to accomplish its mission and goals, and some of these laws may affect your organization. You may already be familiar with some of these laws, such as the prohibition on heavy metals in children's jewelry or more recent bills that ban PFAS in certain products. Since DTSC's purview is quite broad, we want to set the stage today for our conversation and what we're here to talk to you about today. Next slide. Today, we are focused on the Safer Consumer Products Program, which is a unique program. You'll hear me say SCP when I refer to our program. This is our shorthand. SCP's scope does not include these other laws or the more recent product chemical prohibition laws, though our staff may help with the implementation of some of these laws given our subject matter expertise in the topic of safer consumer products. Next slide, please. SCP's mission is to advance the design, development, and use of products that are chemically safer for people and the environment. How do we do this? Next slide. Well, broadly, we work to reduce potentially harmful chemicals in consumer products by requiring manufacturers to look for safer alternatives to the use of potentially harmful chemicals in their products. And since we all buy and use consumer products, we anticipate that you also share in this goal and want to ensure that the products that you sell are as safe as possible for people and the environment. Next slide, please. That's why we've reached out to you. We want to find ways to identify where we can mutually benefit one another. For SCP, we've found that early engagement and relationship building is often more successful than more command and control type approaches. Next. First, today, we're going to be sharing with you an overview of our program so you better understand our role in the process and how we can help one another. Next. We also want to establish relationships with you and two-way communication. As you'll hear from my team, SCP was established to work with manufacturers who control product formulations and the supply chain. However, that can be really challenging. It's also within our scope to work with retailers and distributors. We want to work with you to connect with your supply chain and manufacturers, and then establish relationships with them. You'll hear how working with us can help you to avoid a duty to comply with our laws. We will also be providing contact information for staff and providing other ways in which you can contact us and learn about our program. Next slide, please. And we hope that by understanding your role and how our program works, that you will engage early with us in our process as we start to evaluate the products that you may be selling. I want to reiterate how very grateful we are for your attendance here today, and we really hope that we can be working with you in the future. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Anna.
Thank you so much, Robin. Can I do next slide, please? One more slide, please. Okay. So before I get into the bulk of the presentation, I just want to start off by talking about who we mean when we say retailers and distributors. Retailers and distributors are any entity that brings a consumer product into the California stream of commerce. So this means anyone who sells a product in California or distributes a product for sale in California, whether that be a brick and mortar store or online. I also want to highlight that in some cases, a retailer might be a manufacturer and or a brand, and your industry might use different words to describe these entities. So just feel free to reach out about where you fall into our statutory definitions if you have any question. Slide, please. So Robin went over this slide already, but I want to reiterate that the information I'm about to present to you is specifically for the Safer Consumer Products Regulations. How to comply and how we enforce with the Safer Consumer Product Regulations is not necessarily the same as to how you would comply with and how DTSC would enforce other laws and regulations. Slide, please. So the Safer Consumer Products Regulations and Programs goal is to reduce exposure to toxins by encouraging manufacturers to identify safer alternatives to chemicals of concern in their products. The way we try to accomplish this is through the regulatory framework that is laid out here, and I'll be going through a high-level summary of each of these steps, highlighting ways in which you, retailers and distributors, can be involved in the process, in hopes that you will be, and we can work together to provide safer products to consumers. One thing that I want to highlight that makes the SCP program unique is that we use a precautionary principle, meaning we don't necessarily have to show how exposure to a chemical has caused harm, rather just that exposure to a chemical has the potential to cause harm to humans or the environment. Slide, please. So step one is that we consider chemicals that are included on our candidate chemical list. There are approximately 3,300 chemicals or chemical classes on the candidate chemical list. The candidate chemical list comes from lists of chemicals listed to be as concern from 23 authoritative bodies. We may add additional chemicals to this list as new information becomes available. One way that your organization could use our candidate chemicals list is to create or update your own restricted substances list by adding some of these chemicals or checking to see if the chemicals you are considering for your RSLs are on our list. I mentioned that there's approximately 3,300 chemicals or chemical classes on our list, and that's a lot. So to help us shape our focus at SCP, we consider chemicals that are included on this list along with consumer products that fit into categories listed in our priority product work plan. Slide, please. So our priority product work plan is a list of all the product categories we'll be looking to potentially regulate over a 3-year period. You'll be seeing a link to this plan in our timeline momentarily. In general, we only regulate products that fall within a product category in the priority product work plan, meaning that this is a really good place to go to see if there are any product categories for products that you sell that might be regulated in the near future. Something that's important to note is that we can also look at products that are not on the work plan if we're directed to by legislator or if we're petitioned. So if there's a product that you want us to look into but isn't on this work plan, petitioning us is an option available to you. So one of the fundamental ideas behind the priority product work plan is that it's a tool for us at SCP to be as transparent as possible on where we'll be focusing our regulatory efforts. Through the development of this work plan, there's ample opportunity for public and retailer and distributor comment before finalization through the priority product work plan workshop or the formal comment period. This would be a great opportunity for you retailers and distributors to provide comment to help us shape where we'll focus our efforts. Additionally, our Safer Consumer Products timeline is updated quarterly with all the projects that we're currently working on and at what step we are in that project. So at any given time, you can see what we're actively working on. Slide, please. All right, so we went over the candidate chemical list, the work plan, and the timeline. Now we make the determination that there's a potential public or environmental exposures to the candidate chemical in the product, and that there is potential for one or more of those exposures to contribute to or cause significant or widespread impacts. Then we may place those candidate chemical consumer product combinations on a regulatory list called the priority products list. This is the precautionary principle I mentioned when I was first introducing the regulatory framework. I want to make it very clear that the act of listing a product as a priority product is not a sales prohibition. It just means that we now move on to the next steps of our regulatory framework. There are numerous opportunities for engagement at this step, including workshops and public comment periods during the initial screening phase, on the profile document itself, and during the legal process of listing a priority product into our regulations. Slide, please. I also want to take a moment to further clarify what a priority product listing looks like. These are the priority products we currently have listed. As you can see, there's a specific product type, laundry detergents, with a specific chemical or class of chemicals, NPEs. As noted earlier, we work from a list of candidate chemicals. When we list a product containing one or more of those candidate chemicals as a priority product, there's a terminology change, and the candidate chemical becomes a chemical of concern. If you're interested in any of these particular products, our webpage has a lot more information, and we encourage you to look there. Slide, please. So when products are added to the priority products list, it triggers certain regulatory requirements. One of those requirements could be an alternatives analysis, where the manufacturer of the product evaluates safer alternatives to the chemical of concern in their priority product. We hope that all manufacturers engage in this process because the goal of this step is to a safer product to consumers. We do this with the idea that the alternatives analysis will thoroughly evaluate the potential impacts of the chemical of concern and any potential alternatives and identify trade-offs between the chemical of concern and the potential alternative. This is a defined process that I'm not going to go into too much detail since it's really for those entities that control the chemicals in a product, but it's a very comprehensive report that is submitted to us. It's resource intensive, time consuming, and can be expensive. The key to this step is getting manufacturers engaged. And a way retailers and distributors can engage in this step is by encouraging manufacturers they buy the priority product from to engage in this process. Additionally, something important to note is that at this point, instead of doing an alternatives analysis, many manufacturers opt to remove the chemical of concern from their product through reformulation, or even just stop allowing the product to be brought into California stream of commerce. So it might mean that retailers are seeing different products on the shelves, or products are no longer available for purchase without necessarily realizing it's because it's gone through this process. Slide, please. So the next step in the process is our regulatory response. Generally speaking, DTSC does not do a regulatory response until we have an alternatives analysis. There are numerous different regulatory responses DTSC can take all to protect human health and the environment. So that is a very high-level overview of our regulatory framework. Now you might be wondering who's responsible for doing all these things. Slide, please. So we think of this sort of like a pyramid, with manufacturers of the priority product on top that always have the primary duty to comply with the SCP regulations. If the manufacturer of a priority product fails to comply, their product will be added to a failure to comply list. When a priority product is added to the failure to comply list, DTSC may notify importers or retailers and distributors that they have a duty to comply. Going with this pyramid, SCP was really created to work upstream of retailers, with the smaller group of priority product manufacturers, because they are the ones making the products. However, the reality is complicated in that it's not always easy for us to identify who is making something or who is responsible for a formulation. That's where you retailers and distributors can be very helpful. We want to encourage you to engage early in our process, leverage existing relationships with manufacturers, and to get them engaged in our process so we don't have to come to you with enforcement. Now, you might be thinking, I'm a business that controls the manufacturing of a product, and then I also sell it. Where do I fall into this pyramid? Slide, please. So we understand that sometimes a retailer might also be an importer or a manufacturer, and that these definitions and even the terminology are not the same for every industry, and that you might not consider yourself a retailer or a manufacturer, but under our regulations we do. The important thing to know here is that we'll contact you if you have a duty to comply. Everyone who has any type of interaction with a priority product might be responsible for our regulations at some point. Slide, please. So say we do contact you and tell you we have identified you to be a retailer or distributor per our regulations, and now you have a duty to comply. You essentially have two options for compliance. You can either do the alternatives analysis, where you would evaluate alternatives to use in lieu of the chemical of concern in the product and try to identify a safer alternative. Again, this is time-consuming, resource-intensive, and can be expensive. Alternatively, the other option would be to cease ordering a non-compliant product. Because conducting an alternative analysis is generally aimed at having a product manufacturer evaluate different ways to make the product, SCP recognizes that retailers will most likely opt to cease ordering the non-compliant products and notify DTSC. But like I said before, we'll actively notify you if you have a duty to comply with our regulations, and at that time, we'll give you options for compliance. So right now, our expectation is that you would respond in a timely manner. Slide, please. All right, so non-compliant product. You might be wondering how to know if you are ordering a non-compliant product. Again, we'll notify you if you need to consider cease ordering for your duty to comply. But say you want to be proactive. we actually have all our non-compliant priority products online on our failure to comply list. You can find it by typing in calsafer.dtsc.ca.gov, going to this homepage, and navigating to this big View Failure to Comply List button. Slide, please. This takes you to our list where you can either search or just look through it. I want to make it very clear that only the products on this list are non-compliant. The manufacturer could make multiple products, and you don't need to consider stop ordering all the products a manufacturer makes, just the product that is listed on the failure to comply list. Also, this list can change if a priority product non-compliance is remedied, and at that time, you could continue ordering it again. Next slide, please. All right. Say we're why a priority product is on the list, how it might get it, or just information in general. As an example, let's look at the first product on our list by navigating to see details. Slide, please. This takes you to a web page where you can find all the information we have, such as the basis for non-compliance. In this example, the manufacturer failed to submit a product removal notification or a final alternatives analysis report. It also gives product details such as product names or just more information about the priority product itself. Slide, please. If you scroll down on that page, you can see known candidate chemicals in the product. You can also see the chemical of concern in the product. So that's the candidate chemical that became a chemical of concern when the product was listed as a priority product. We also have supporting documentation relating to the listing. And then it shows you how to get off the list. In this case, it would be submitting a product removal confirmation or a final alternatives analysis. The reason I'm pointing out the basis of listing and how to get off the list is because I think it's important to highlight that if a priority product is not on this list, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's safer for consumers. It just means that the manufacturer is actively engaged in our process to work on identifying a safer alternative to the chemical of concern in that priority product. Slide, please. Okay. So I can imagine that was a lot of information to digest. So the next few slides are a summary and action items that I'm hoping you take from this webinar. I've identified 4 key areas as shown in this figure that retailers and distributors can make the biggest impact in. Slide, please. First, review our candidate chemicals list. Retailers and distributors have a choice of what products they buy. Encourage manufacturers to make ingredients lists more transparent and use the candidate chemical list as a potential source for your RSLs or to help develop or implement a corporate chemical policy. Slide, please. A really good place to review the candidate chemical list is back on calsafer.dtsc.ca.gov. Instead of clicking on the View Failure to Comply List button, go to the upper right and click Candidate Chemical List. Slide, please. Here, you can export all the 3,300 chemicals and chemical classes into an Excel spreadsheet by clicking on Excel. Slide, please. Or say that's way too cumbersome and you want to filter. You would go up and click Advanced. Slide. And say as a retailer, your business decides that they want to avoid chemicals with a carcinogenic hazard trait. Go to Filter by Hazard Traits, scroll down to the drop-down and select Carcinogenicity. Next slide, please. Click Update Results. Slide, please. And from here, you can decide to export the pared down list of chemicals that have been listed with a carcinogenic hazard trait, or decide to add additional filters. Slide, please. So secondly, we invite you to engage early in our process when we start to evaluate potential products that may contain one or more chemicals on our candidate chemical list. There are many opportunities to provide input into our process, and we think you may be interested in looking ahead at what we might regulate and take action to encourage manufacturers to eliminate those chemicals from the products that you sell, especially when a safer alternative might be possible. Slide, please. Third, the best way to determine what is possible is to get manufacturers to participate in our process. We're hoping that you can help us by helping us communicate with manufacturers. We hope you can help us encourage manufacturers to look for safer alternatives to potentially harmful chemicals in their products, especially once a priority product is listed and the alternatives analysis portion begins. Slide, please. Lastly, sign up for our e-blast list so you can stay informed and check out our timeline of current projects. Attend workshops and provide comments so we can more effectively provide safer product to consumers. There's a general e-list, SCP e-list, where you can stay informed of all the actions the SCP is taking, or there's a retailer and distributor specific e-list that we're going to use to send targeted outreach. Slide, please. So here's our contact information, and I also just want to put out a general open welcome to please meet with us one-on-one so we can establish a relationship, learn how we can support your efforts to provide safer products to consumers, and how you can support our mission. So please let us know if you have any questions, and also be on the lookout for us contacting you. And with that, I will pass it on to Danielle.
Thank you, Anna. This concludes the presentation portion of our workshop today. Once again, check back at DTSC's Safer Consumer Products webpage within 2 to 3 weeks for a copy of the PowerPoint and the recording at https://dtsc.gov/SCP/SAFER-consumersproducts/events/. We will now begin the Q&A portion of this workshop. As previously mentioned, if you would like to send us a question, please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You may submit as many questions as you want. However, we do request that you submit one question at a time so that we are able to respond to each one adequately. As a reminder, we will not be taking questions by the chat feature. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. You will be called on, and when prompted to unmute yourself, please press *6. Okay, let's begin. I see a couple of questions have come in so far. So our first one, actually, I'm going to read the first two together as they are related. What do establishments do if they have products containing formaldehyde? Can they complete the use or must they throw it away? This is specific to salons. And in addition, is there an information page listing a contact if establishment business owners have questions?
I can address the first question if that's okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Rob Bruce, and I supervise the compliance and enforcement program in the the compliance and enforcement unit within the Safer Consumer Products program. And so there was a question asked: what do establishments do if they have products containing formaldehyde? Can they complete the use or must they throw it away? This is specific to salons. Thank you. First of all, I just want to point out that we, being the Safer Consumer Products program, have not listed any products containing formaldehyde, and so we specifically don't regulate them. However, it's my understanding that those products may be regulated under the California Safe Cosmetics Law. And so generally speaking, you might want to consult with local jurisdictions and so forth on disposal requirements and things like that. But if you are looking for additional information on this, what we would be happy to do is to follow up with you later and try to gather some additional information for you, and perhaps refer you to the folks that can better help you with that question. I can move on to the a question disappeared from my view, Danielle.
Rob, I believe Jen typed an answer to that question. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks. I did not. Oh, yes, I see it there. Okay, thank you.
Would you like to move on to the next question?
Sure. I'm not. Okay. So the question, in case everyone can't see it, is could we give some specifics on skincare products, given that they do not contain 1,4-dioxane? At this moment in time, we don't have any skincare products that I'm aware of listed as a priority product. So I'm not exactly certain what kind of information specifically you're looking for. And so maybe you could follow up in the chat or in the Q&A, I should say, and let us know if you're looking for more specific information. Again, we'd be happy to meet with you outside of this meeting and talk with you more. But yeah, I'm not in a position to give any more specifics because we don't currently regulate those products. So I would need to know specifically what you were interested in.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. Our next question comes from Augie Venezia. Are the 3,300 chemicals and chemical classes the same as Prop 65 listed chemicals?
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question. And the answer is no. Prop 65 is one of the source lists that contribute to our list of candidate chemicals. But as Anna indicated early on, the candidate chemicals list was adopted from lists made by 23 authoritative bodies. So OEHA, or the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment in California, is the one who administers the Prop 65 list. In addition, there were 22 other entities from around the world whose lists were adopted into the candidate chemicals list. And so as noted, it's 3,300 chemicals and chemical classes. And what that means is, for example, some chemicals are captured as a class. So for example, phthalates or perfluorinated chemicals, that we've heard a lot about in the news lately, like PFASs. Those types of things are captured as whole classes. So any chemical that fits into that class based on certain characteristics would be captured by the list. And that, I should point out, that's whether or not it's specifically listed. So if you have a chemical that is in a category of phthalates, for example, based on its chemical structure, it would be included in the list. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Rod. Next question. Formaldehyde is now banned in California. We cannot find a contact anywhere. Thank you.
It looks like someone else is answering that. Is that correct? Or am I the one who's going to answer that? I'm sorry, I didn't click the answer live button, so I'm not sure. Oh, okay.
Hi, everyone. Jen Jackson. I'm the branch manager for Safer Consumer Products Program, overseeing some of the work that Rob and Anna are doing. And formaldehyde is under the purview of the California Cosmetics Products Law, which is administered by the California Department of Public Health. And I can put into the chat their email address. It's a general email address, safecosmetics@cdph.ca.gov.
Thank you, Jen. Our next question comes from Lisa Betcherer. Does the SCP only apply to products that are sold to consumers, or does it also apply to products that a company uses in a store, not for sale to a consumer, but a consumer might be exposed to?
I'll take that question. And the answer is that no, that the law does not only apply to consumers. First of all, consumer product, the statute that gave us original authority is known as California's Green Chemistry Law. It's in the California Health and Safety Code, and it very broadly defines a consumer product as basically anything that's put into commerce in California. It doesn't specify that it has to be sold to what we might recognize as a consumer. It really corresponds to any product exchanging hands in California. So, for example, wholesale products that are sold wholesale to businesses that they then use in their business, that product could be covered if we listed that product as a priority product.
Thank you, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question comes from Kevin Garetti. What is the process for determining a candidate chemical?
Okay, initially our candidate chemical list was established by our regulations. The Safer Consumer Product Regulations define the candidate chemical list. And that's how the original list listing of 23 authoritative bodies that we adopted, or the list that were promulgated by 23 authoritative bodies, we adopted them into our candidate chemical list through a regulatory mechanism. So those specific lists are actually identified in our regulations. Now, we do have the ability to add and take away chemicals from the candidate chemical list as new information becomes available. That actually requires a regulatory action. So, for example, we have proposed, and I think reviewed in our timeline online, that we're taking a look at certain chemicals now and adding them to our list. That would actually require a formal rulemaking. We would have to file with our Office of Administrative Law. We would have to start a public participation or public input process, and it would actually go through the formal regulatory development process. So I hope that answers your question.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Our next question is from Myra Reddy. Who handles compliance for products containing chemicals that are banned?
Okay, so again, I think that Anna mentioned this. We don't do bans, so to speak. Our normal regulatory process is not a ban or a restriction type of a process. It's a process to seek or to ask manufacturers to seek safer alternatives to their products. We ask them to engage in our process and to look for safer alternatives by going through a regulatory process that all involves an alternatives analysis, and that's ultimately where we hope they go. We don't ban things, and so earlier, I think this individual asked about formaldehyde. We don't administer that ban. And so, I can generally answer this question that who handles compliance, for products containing chemicals that are banned depends on who is responsible for enforcing the ban. And in the case of formaldehyde, it's not DTSC, it's the Department of Public Health. And so, answers your question again. If you'd like to follow up with us after this meeting, we would be happy to follow up with you and try to provide you with some assistance finding out who you could speak to about your concerns.
Excellent. And Myra also put in, thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, our next question comes from Fernando Vela. What are the consequences of selling product from a supplier listed on the failure to comply list?
Okay, so first of all, there aren't any consequences unless we have come and notified you. But I want to really point out, it's not selling. We don't ban the sale. So let's say there's a scenario where we put a product on the failure to comply list and we've informed you as a retailer that you have to cease ordering that product. That does not mean that you have to remove the product from your shelves and stop selling it. You're able to sell through your existing stock. What it asks you to do is to cease ordering that product in the future and to continue offering it for sale once you've basically sold through the stock that you already have in your possession. So it's not a recall. Okay, it's a cease ordering requirement. And that's why, again, we're here to engage with you. We want to build relationships with you. We think that we all meaning SCP and many of the retailers and distributors out there have an interest in selling products that are as safe as they can be to their customers, right? And so, we think that we can be mutually beneficial to one another. We think that you can help us in this regard by encouraging your manufacturers when we have products that may be added to our FTC list because a manufacturer has failed to comply, that you can maybe reach out to that manufacturer and encourage them, or maybe we can come to you and ask you to help us reach out to that manufacturer, because sometimes we have trouble finding the appropriate persons to contact, especially, if the manufacturer might not be in the country or something like that. So there's no consequence of continuing to sell a product. Now, if we asked you to cease ordering a product and you didn't stop cease ordering the product, then you may be placed on the failure to comply list yourself. But again, you have no obligation to do anything in terms of cease ordering or any other compliance responsibilities until we notify you and advise you that you have those responsibilities.
Thank you, Rob. I see we have a couple of attendees with their hands raised, so I'm going to call on them to unmute themselves and ask their questions. First, Erin Collerin, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. If you could please unmute yourself and ask your question. Erin, if you're still with us, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, good. Go ahead and ask a question. I'm afraid we can't hear you. You might still be on mute. I'm going to give another moment. Erin, if you're having any trouble, the unmute button should be in the bottom left corner where it looks like a small microphone and says audio underneath it. If you click on that, you should be able to unmute yourself. If not, we'll come back to you in a few moments.
Yeah, and Danielle, I'd like to also just mention that if anyone out there is having any kind of technical difficulties and is unable for whatever reason beyond our control to submit a question, please feel free to email us, and we will be responsive.
Erin, in case you're called in on the phone, you do need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, I do see Erin has lowered their hand, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Augie or Audrey, I'm going to go ahead and call on you next since your hand is raised. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. If you're called in on phone, press *6.
What the hell?
Oh, we can hear you, Augie.
I typed in the question and I don't understand what's going on.
Is this the question on whether or not we participate in like industry trade shows?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see it here. So the answer is yes, we intend to. The answer is we have not yet. That's a fuller answer. And I just want to explain to you that our program's been in existence for about 10 years, but in all honesty, it's taken us that long to sort of work through the entire process. As you might imagine, it's a complex process, and so we're recently getting experience in the compliance and enforcement aspect of it. And we're just now initiating these sort of outreach efforts to talk to other entities. We've been primarily focused on manufacturers up to this point. And so our intent is we've reached out to a lot of trade associations and that sort of thing. And our intent is when those kind of opportunities provide themselves, we absolutely will be making an effort to go to those kinds of events and to seek to provide information to the attendees. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and mute you again now and move on to the next question, if that's okay. Okay. Our next question comes from Kevin Goretti, and it is 66 ppdq now a priority pollutant?
So not exactly. 6 ppd in tires, or tires containing 6 ppd, which for those of you who don't know, 6 ppd is an antioxidant in tires that's added to the tire to prevent oxidative damage. And as tires wear out, they release particles that wash into waterways, and ppd was identified as a chemical that ultimately can adversely impact salmon. And it forms a quinone when it reacts with ozone and oxygen. And that chemical is the 6 ppd derivative that causes the problem with salmon. And so tires containing 6 ppd were identified as a priority product. The chemical of concern in them is 6 ppd. When we list a chemical of concern, or when we evaluate a candidate chemical for the possibility of identifying it as a chemical of concern in a product, we have the ability to not only look at the chemical itself, but the environmental fate of that chemical and whether or not that produces any impacts. And so in this case, it's not exactly 6 ppd, it's a quinone derivative, but it comes from the 6 ppd that's in tires. And so that's why tires containing 6 ppd were labeled as a priority product containing a chemical of concern. And now, in fact, we have quite a number of tire manufacturers going through our process. They're in the alternatives analysis phase of the process. And so they are currently looking at the potential for safer alternatives. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Rob. Our next question comes from Yairo Saramento. How does this affect the food industry?
it doesn't exactly. We don't regulate food. And so, we have the ability to maybe regulate, food packaging or something like that, but we have not done so to date. And so, well, I shouldn't say that. We have, I think, yeah, no, I don't think we've regulated any particular. I don't think we've regulated any particular food items, but yeah, but we have been considering regulating packaging and things associated with food.
Thank you, Rob. Those are all the questions I've seen come in so far. So as a friendly reminder to our attendees, if you would like to ask a question, please go ahead and either open up the Q&A box, the icon is at the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your hand and we will call on you to unmute yourself and you can state your question. For anyone who's calling in by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question, and when we call on you, you'll press *6 to unmute yourself. We'll go ahead and give another few minutes for folks to get their questions in case you need a little extra time to collect your thoughts or write out your question. So please go ahead and let us know what you would like to ask. And while you're collecting your thoughts, I will simply point out we have been dropping useful links for everyone in the chat. If you're not sure where to find that, that is another icon at the bottom of your screen. Just simply click on chat, and there are a number of links to useful websites and resources, as well as contact information for many of our panelists today and the Safer Consumer Products program in general, if you would like to reach out after this workshop is over and share any additional questions that you think of. Again, we're just going to give a couple more minutes for anyone who would like to ask any additional questions. So please go ahead. Our time is all yours. I see we did receive a new question. This one is from Kevin Goretti. Regarding tires, the priority product list gives you the ability to regulate all tires entering into the California markets. Do you ever work in concert with other agencies? For example, tires also have the tire wear particles issue.
Yeah, I can say that generally, yes. And what I mean by that is, we don't have the ability to implement other agencies' mandates from the legislature, and they don't necessarily have the ability to implement ours. But having said that, we work on a collaborative basis with both inter and intrastate agencies. So we have very close working relationships with, for example, the California Air Resources Board. We consult them on our regulatory process. Typically, when we're thinking of listing products, we get their input. We also partner with other states, and we've been a part of various processes that involve coordination with other states. Our Interstate Chemicals Clearinghouse is an example. Our Toxics in Packaging Clearinghouse is another example. And generally speaking, we have a lot of relationships that we exchange information, collaborate on various things, and that's generally speaking. I hope that answers your question. If you want more specific answer, more specific details, we'd be happy to meet with you separately and talk with you. I think I've answered your question, but if you have something more specific you'd like to ask, then the general response I gave, you can indicate that. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Kevin. Okay, those are all of the questions we have received so far. I'm going to go ahead and give another few minutes for folks to drop questions in the chat or raise their hands. In the meantime, I'll just mention again that after the workshop is over, in about 2 to 3 weeks, we will post a copy of the slides and a recording of this workshop to the Safer Consumer Products webpage. We have dropped that link in the chat for you as well. It's https://dtsc.ca.gov/scp/safe consumer products workshops events / And I see Justin drop the link in the chat for your reference. Thank you, Justin. We're just going to give everyone another few minutes. Please feel free to continue sending us questions either through the Q&A box or by raising your hand.
In regards to that last question about our interactions with others, I neglected to mention that we interact very closely with OEHA, who administers the Prop 65 list. In fact, they were responsible for developing some associated regulations. There are not only the safer consumer product regulations that impact our program directly, but there are some regulations in an adjacent chapter in Title 22 that actually describe the hazard traits and how to evaluate them and determine whether or not a chemical may have a potential hazard trait that we're concerned with. And we rely on those regulations that were developed by OEHA as well. We also associate with them, we collaborate with them on an ongoing basis and always have. They review a lot of our work, kind of like an internal peer review, and feed into our process. CARB, I mentioned, California Air Resources Board. We also work with the Resources Control Board. We've worked on them with microplastics, for example, and some other chemicals. We work with the US EPA and have extensive, in fact, at one time we had some staff from US EPA actually assigned to work in our offices with us. So close collaboration and coordination there. So yeah, I just wanted to expand on that a little bit while we were waiting to see if any other questions came up.
Okay, it looks like those were all of the questions. Again, if you do think of any additional questions after the end of this workshop, please go ahead and email your questions to saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. This concludes the Q&A portion of our workshop. So we're now going to have closing remarks by Rob. Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Danielle. I already introduced myself, but just to reiterate, I supervise the compliance and enforcement unit in the Safer Consumer Products Program, and Anna is one of my staff, and she has not been here all that long. She's been in state service a while, but we were lucky enough to hire her on this last summer. And I first just want to just acknowledge that, Anna, you did a fantastic job with your presentation. She's been picking things up really quickly, and we're really lucky to have brought her on board. So thank you, Anna. And then also thank you to Robin and to you, Danielle, for helping to facilitate this meeting. It's been invaluable. So anyways, I just wanted to reiterate to everyone that we aren't here to sort of identify folks who we want to go out and enforce against. That's not our purpose. We're here because we want to build relationships with you. This program is really going to work more successfully if folks get on board, right? And we can establish relationships with folks. And so that's our hope. And we recognize that you may be key to helping us because manufacturers are all over the place. They're all over the world. They're hard to, in some cases, they're hard to contact, hard to reach out to. And we think that you hold a valuable key to helping us communicate with them, to helping us encourage them to get involved in our program. And that's what we want to do. We want to build relationships like that so that, if a product comes along that we're having trouble identifying or communicating with the manufacturers, maybe you can help us. Maybe we'll reach out to you. And in fact, we intend to do that anyway. We'll probably, most of you registered for this workshop, we may reach out to you. in the not too distant future and seek a meeting just so we can become better acquainted. And we invite you to do the same. If there's anything that comes up that you want to talk about, want additional information, want maybe specific information on how this program may impact your business or what have you, please reach out. We will absolutely meet with you, and we'd be very excited to do that. So we hope this is sort of the start of a relationship. I did want to go back and emphasize, that, and Anna mentioned this, because there is a misperception sometimes that our program, when we list a priority product, is some sort of a restriction or sales prohibition or something. That's not what it is. Likewise, when a product goes on our failure to comply list, again, I mentioned this, that until we notify you, you don't have to do anything. And even if we did notify you and tell you, okay, we can't get this manufacturer to comply or to get involved with this, it's time for you to cease ordering or do an AA. That doesn't mean you have to throw away all the product, recall all the product that you've already purchased. You can sell through your existing inventories. It's just that we ask you to either help us reach out to that manufacturer and to get them on board and get them communicating with us, or to cease ordering in the future. That's what the ultimate ask would be. So I just wanted to point that out. We're not here to try and hurt your bottom lines, and we're here to hopefully, make products that are sold in California safer for people in the environment. And again, we think that you have that same sort of interest, and so we hope that we can be mutually helpful to one another. And again, Anna provided some links to some e-listservs, and I really encourage you, if you want to stay up to date on what we are doing, to go to those and to register to receive those emails, because we send out a lot of information. You'll get information when we're considering a product and we're talking about possibly listing one. You'll get information on that. You'll get an opportunity to weigh in, to be part of the process. When we prepare a new priority product work plan, we have public workshops on that. We take public input. You'll be able to be part of that process. You can tell us about your concerns if you have them, for example. You can have input into that process. Candidate chemical listings, when we add or take chemicals away from the list, you'll have an opportunity to weigh in there. So again, we really encourage you to do that. And I'll just close by saying you have a standing invitation to reach out to any of us at any time to meet and talk in more detail. And with that, I just want to thank you all again for coming, everyone who attended. We really are happy with the amount of folks who registered for this webinar, and we hope this is the start of a really productive relationship. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you to all of our panelists and to our audience for joining us today. We appreciate your time and staying engaged during the workshop. We hope you have a wonderful day and to hear from you soon. Goodbye, everyone.